The Augvape Merlin Nano MTL RTA. The Merlin Nano MTL RTA was sent to me for a review directly from Augvape, and this is coming hot off the heels of the popularity of nicotine salts, low wattage, and tight draw vaping. So this is a rebuildable mouth-to-lung vape, and I'm a huge fan of rebuildable MTL atomizers, so I've been really excited to share this one. It's 18 millimeters in diameter, it's bottom fill, it has a 2-post single coil deck. It's made of stainless steel and it comes in the colors of black and stainless steel, and you can get it for $24.99 in most places. In the box you get the Merlin Nano MTL, 3.5mm bubble glass, a POM MTL drip tip, 2mm straight glass, one 1.0 ohm Kanthal coil, and one 0.6 ohm nichrome coil, 3 airflow plugs, and some spare parts, O-rings, an Allen key, and some screws. All right, let's talk about the design. So in typical Augvape fashion, there aren't a ton of colors to pick from. You have black or stainless steel. That covers the bases, and I think it keeps things simple, so I like that. And at 18 millimeters diameter, the tank is really skinny. Augvape also includes a beauty ring, which you can use to sort of round out the base of the tank. It's not necessary and you don't have to use it, but it helps make the tiny 18 millimeter tank look less weird on a bigger device. But overall, I think the tank is pretty plain. It doesn't look all that great to me, but performance is what really matters here. You get one basic 510 drip tip with the Nano, and this is a slim and tall drip tip designed for a restricted draw, and it's made of POM plastic. It fits nicely into the top cap and doesn't wiggle around or anything. It's also pretty comfortable to use. The top cap connects directly to the glass tank. The first thing that you'd expect here would be the liquid fill ports, but that's not how Augvape designed this. The fill ports are actually on the bottom of the tank. We'll get into that later, but as far as the top cap goes, there's really nothing else to it. You get 2 tubes in the box, which is common these days. You get a bigger bubble glass tube, which holds 3.5 mils of e-liquid, and that's a pretty good amount of e-liquid for an MTL tank. The drawback here is that it looks terrible, in my opinion. It just sticks out way too far, but you have that option if you want it. And you also get a straight glass tube, which holds 2 mils of e-liquid. This looks much better, and is still a nice capacity for an MTL tank. That's the same as most typical pod devices. Below the glass is the connector chamber. This is basically what Augvape is using to hold the glass in place and to connect the chimney. This is also where you fill up the tank with e-liquid. Under this is another chamber, or a chamber reducer. So this covers the build deck and restricts how much e-liquid gets into the deck. The chamber creates a really tight space over the deck, which is good because that prevents loss of flavor. And that flavor comes straight off the coil and straight up the chimney, so it seems to work pretty well. There are 2 little tabs on the chamber, and those fit into 2 slots on the deck, so you'll know that it's in the right place when it's seated and doesn't turn left or right. The easiest way to line it up is just by knowing that the liquid ports on the sides of the chamber line up with the wicks on the coil. All right, let's talk about the build deck. As I mentioned, the deck is rebuildable and it's designed for a single coil build. There's not a lot of room to build a big coil here. And because the raised airflow hole and the posts are all metal, you need to make sure that your coil doesn't touch any of that metal and short out. So you're limited to around a 2 millimeter diameter or less coil. An MTL tank doesn't need a big coil anyway. This is a very basic 2-post deck. There's also a peak insulator at the bottom of the liquid well and a hole where the airflow comes up and hits the bottom of the coil. You get 2 coils in the box. One is a 1.0 ohm Kanthal coil and the other is a 0.6 ohm nichrome coil. The coils come in the same package, so you can't tell the 2 apart, but the Kanthal is magnetic while the nichrome isn't. Nichrome is also shinier. I don't know why Augvape didn't properly label the 2, but you can use a magnet to figure it out. So this tank can be a little difficult to build just because the space is so small. You get a simple single coil, hold it in place with your screwdriver or coil tool, and that sits perfectly in those grooves on the airflow holes there, in the airflow grooves, and then you position the coil legs under the screws and tighten them down. And just to make sure that it's all built correctly, I would recommend putting it on a device and firing it first, and then you can wick it. Then to wick the coil, you cut the ends of the wicks to about the edge of the base and tuck them down into the liquid well. I like to soak the wick a little before closing up the deck. And if you're wondering what I'm using here, this is Pitted from the Surf's Up line from Vapecraft Inc. It's an awesome sweet melon flavor. I like it a lot. Okay, so let's quickly talk about the airflow insert under the coil. So one thing that I've noticed with how these airflow inserts can impact building the deck is that they really get in the way. The coils need to be really tiny to fit in between the space, or you need to raise the coils above the inserts if the coils are too wide. Otherwise, they're going to touch that metal and short out. This definitely makes building the deck a little more difficult. But once you have that all sorted out, put that chamber back over the deck and make sure that it's tight in its slots, then put that tank together and then you can fill it up. So like I mentioned earlier, this is a bottom fill tank, which is weird to see these days. So with the deck off, you'll see the big liquid fill ports. These holes are pretty big, but the problem that I've had is that it's so deep. A little fine tip bottle can't reach to the fill holes, so I have to drip the liquid into them, which can get a little messy. And I've accidentally dropped liquid into that chimney section, so watch out for that. Not that it's going to mess anything up, it's just messy. It's not as convenient as top fill, that's for sure, because it means that you have to take the tank off the device and then remove the entire base. It's just not as easy as it could be. But from what I understand, the reason for this is to prevent the tank from flooding while filling it. And that's definitely one of the drawbacks of other MTL tanks, like the Expromiser, which is an awesome MTL tank. I'm not saying anything bad about it, just one of the cons of it. Another benefit of the bottom fill is that it's really easy to take the tank off of the deck and change out the coil or the airflow insert without having to empty the tank or worrying about it spilling. So there are benefits to this filling method too. All right, let's talk about the airflow system. Augvape is calling this a hidden airflow design, and that's because you can barely tell that it's there. This thin line at the bottom of the base is actually where the airflow comes in. It's pretty interesting. But you'll also notice that there isn't an airflow control ring here, so you can't adjust airflow from the outside. To adjust the airflow, you have to use one of those 3 adjustable airflow inserts that come in the box. One is actually pre-installed. You have a 1mm airflow insert, a 1.2mm insert, and one that has 2 holes that are sized 1mm. Those inserts press fit into the deck. They're held only with a single O-ring, so you need to make sure that they're pressed in as tight as you can so that they don't fall out. And they are a little bit wobbly, and on mine, especially the dual hole insert, that one's especially wobbly. So you really want to make sure that they're in as good as you can get them. I would have liked for these to screw in like they do on the original Merlin MTL RTA. So clearly this isn't as easy to use as an adjustable airflow ring, and I have to admit it's a bit of a pain to have to deal with. But once you find the airflow control insert that you like, you won't have to deal with it again. You'll always know that it's set at the right place. You can take the inserts in and out with the coil still in place if you really don't want to take the coil out to change the airflow, but it's definitely easier to just pull the coil out. I have done it a bunch of times already though, and you get used to it. It becomes a lot easier. With the smallest 1.0mm airflow insert, the draw is extremely tight. It's so tight that it pulls liquid into the deck and causes it to flood a little bit. So this one isn't really for chain vaping. I don't get any liquid in my mouth or anything, but I can hear the liquid gurgling in the deck. You definitely can't do a lung hit here. With the 1.2mm airflow insert, it's still quite restricted, but there's a noticeably more airflow than with the 1.0mm insert. With the dual 1.0mm airflow insert, you get a much looser tight draw. You can actually get a very restricted lung draw with this insert, but I mean very restricted. I'm guessing that it's still going to appeal mostly to mouth to lung vapors. You could use this one if you want tight draw and bigger hits. Out of all 3 inserts, my favorite is the 1.2mm insert. Right in the middle. The restriction is just perfect for how I like to vape. Okay, so the 2 most important things for vapors who use MTL devices, the flavor and the throat hit. So the flavor is really good. The small chamber seems to deliver the flavor straight to the top without losing anything in between. I think the flavor out of this is really good. And the throat hit. It's exactly what I would expect from the liquid that I'm vaping. It's not muting anything and it's really satisfying. So both flavor and throat hit work really good out of this tank. All right, so my final thoughts. The looks of the tank really isn't great looking. It's pretty plain, in my opinion. It's also really skinny and tall, so it doesn't look great on a lot of devices. If you care about looks, you'll probably want to use it on something really small, but it's nice that Augvape included a beauty ring to help make it look better on bigger devices. I think that expands it to 22mm. Building the tank and adjusting the airflow is also a lot more challenging than most rebuildables, or at least I think so. This tank definitely requires some extra work to get used to, but I found that after doing a few builds, it just gets way easier to work with. I'm not a big fan of the wobbly airflow inserts either, but I haven't had a problem with them in my use so far. As far as performance goes, the Merlin Nano MTL RTA is awesome. The flavor is very good, the draw is really smooth and comfortable. You have several airflow options to pick from. It doesn't leak, or at least it hasn't on me, and it has no problems with wicking whatsoever. With all these things said, I think this tank will appeal more to people who like to tinker, but it probably won't appeal to a beginner looking for an easy-to-use MTL tank. But I could be wrong. Anyway, this was sent to me for a review from Augvape. You can get it for around $24.99 from most vendors online. I already had this review recorded and pretty much finished before one of my Facebook friends, Tony, mentioned to me that the Merlin Nano RTA is pretty much a copy of the Dwarf 16 RTA from KHW Mods. So I did look it up, and yeah, it's very close with just a few differences. The Dwarf is a little smaller, the airflow intake is a little different, and the airflow inserts are designed a little differently. The Dwarf is also hard to get. Now, the one benefit of the Merlin Nano is that it's much easier to get and about 1/4 of the price. So, but I did want to point all of that out.